but there's been a drop off, just a fall off a cliff of kids who want to get their driver's license. When I was a kid, I mean, at 14, you start talking about it and dreaming about it. And at 15, you start obsessing about it, right? And that morning you turn 16, you are at the Department of Motor Vehicle. You are out the door trying to get in, and no kid wants to drive anymore. And it's because their entire world is encapsulated in their phones and in their gaming systems and in their homes. There's no reason to leave. My whole world is here. And I just fold in on myself.
Hey, joining me today on the Freedom Pack podcast, I have Dr. John Delony, mental health and wellness expert, a Ramsey personality, best-selling author, the author of this brand new book, Building a Non-Anxious Life. Dr. John Delony, welcome to the Freedom Pack podcast. It's an absolute pleasure to host you.
Oh man, it's a pleasure to be hanging out with you here in South Wales. I wish, but we're doing the best we can.
Well, it's a very rainy South Wales, so I doubt you want to be hanging out here. So, I mentioned the book there. Let's dive right in. A lot of people at the moment around this word anxiety, they labeling, and I think it was Jonathan Haidt who recently wrote a book about this. He labeled this sort of Gen Z generation the anxious generation. Would you agree with that sentiment?
Oh yeah. I think adults we have different words for it, like chronic stress, we call it workaholic, right? And we have better numbing agents. Like we've got access to pharmaceuticals and we can buy beer, right? And we can get our own Netflix accounts to just numb our lives away. But yeah, I think his assessment is spot on.
Yeah, I think the figure is, and it's quite a loose figure. I think you quote this in the book. You say that a quarter to half of the US reports their lives are affected by anxiety in some way. And I can only imagine this is just going to sort of snowball and snowball. Why do you think that is? Is it sort of technology? Is it the education that we're giving these kids? Why are they the anxious generation?
I mean, I think Jonathan makes a pretty compelling case in my book that, I mean, the stats are relatively, I mean, they're as compelling as I've seen. We handed every kid a smartphone and said, go make good choices. And there was quite a rise there. I actually think that laid the groundwork. This is just my unsophisticated opinion. I think we unbundled a generation of young person, and then COVID hit. And what they were forced to do was spend days upon days upon days locked in a house with rageful, angry, out of control adults. And that was the part that I don't think they were able to come back from. I do believe that technology plays a gnarly role. There's no question about it. But I think it's the adults in their lives that have cashed out, that hand them electronic babysitters, that themselves are screaming and yelling about church issues or about political issues or about how their government's trying to kill you, the doctor's trying to kill you, your teachers are trying to kill you with masks or no mask, whatever's going on. And the kids are the ones absorbing all of this. A friend of mine, he's an experimental psychologist. His name's Dr. Richard Beck, and he gave me a word. He called it hope sickness. There's a generation of kids that understand that they'll probably be dead in about 15 or 20 years from the other political party, from climate change, from some sort of other pandemic. Like they just assume that they're on a train off the edge of a cliff, and they have no vision and no adults in their life with any sort of emotional stability to give them an alternative picture.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think it was, I can't remember who it was. We had someone on the show before. I think his name might have been Tal Ben-Jahar. He described... I
love him. Yeah.
I think he described it when we asked him what the difference was between being sad and actually depressed. I think he described depression as sadness without hope. Do you think that's where these kids are now? Because as you mentioned there, they're being bombarded with all this political stuff. If it's not a disease that's going to kill you, it's climate change. If it's not climate change, it's a nuclear war. You can't escape this stuff. Do you think that's a fair assessment of these kids? They are, as you mentioned, they're lacking hope.
Yeah, they lack hope, and also our bodies, like physiologically, are designed to process trauma and scary things in community and with with physical action. And so my dad and I go round and round. When he was a young kid in Houston, there were nuclear weapons in Cuba pointed right at the U.S. and they all understood we're going to die they did nuclear weapon drills because they were pointed right at the U.S. and there was somebody with their finger on the button, like, right? It was a game of chicken, right? And so what my dad had was a group of community leaders. He had other men in his life as a young boy, like coaches and other people who were moving him along. He was involved in a local church. He had friends. He was outside most of the day. He wasn't glued to a screen. So I think you can see a perilous thing coming at you and you can experience something scary and terrifying, but it's when you experience it alone that your body implodes on itself. And what we've done is we've outsourced all of our connectivity to these boxes, to our phones and to the computer, and our body knows we are all by ourselves. And we can lie to ourselves and say, I've got all these friends and I've got all this connection and I'm making so many friends playing video games at night together. And you are, but you're just transmitting data. You're not connected, man.
And this technology, these social media apps, they almost seem to be, the algorithm seems to be geared towards negative content, negative ideas, almost scary content, because that's typically what's going to hook you and keep your attention for longer. What advice, and I always hate talking about parental advice because not many parents out there actually want to hear it. But in terms of the relationship between children growing up in this era and technology, where do we find the balance? Because obviously, we don't want technology to ruin their lives, but also we don't want them to be 10 years behind everyone else when it comes to college, and people are so in tune with technology that they're disadvantaged for not being. Where do we? Is there a balance?
It was back in 2012 or 2013. I was at a meeting. I was either at a meeting. I read it. I was in a meeting of some sort. I was a part of a small think tank that was associated with the university, and there was an advisor from Apple or Google or Pearson, one of these big tech companies, and it had come out that all the executives were sending their kids to schools with no screens, just whiteboards, and they said this person said two things that just laid a seed in my soul that has continued to bear fruit as my kids have gotten older. Number one, he scoffed and laughed and he goes, those screens aren't learning. Learning is a great teacher and a whiteboard or in a black and some chalk, I think is what he said. And then the second thing was, and his prediction is bearing out in real time. By the time our children, our young kids, are of the age where they will be utilizing these tools, they will be so advanced and so intuitive. If we can't even wrap our heads around the next 4 years of tools that will be coming to our kids. So there won't be any sort of, if my son just has a small keychain that he talks to and it's AI and it will tell him where he's going and when he's got to be there and how, there is no like well, they're going to get behind. It's just not true. It's simply an outdated way of thinking. And so I don't have any concern about that at all. I just don't, I don't see balance here at all. I don't. In my house, I have a 14-year-old. I got a middle schooler about to be a high schooler, and I have an 8-year-old. And I'm pretty ruthless when I'm not going to give the internet to my kids, and I'm especially not going to give my kids to the internet, unfettered, walking around with smartphones. And so, and interestingly, when kids come to our house, they know they put all their phones in a bowl because they can't, and they do it willingly as almost as though they're freed from it. And then they run out. I live out in the woods here in Nashville, Tennessee, and they run out in the woods and they play and they sit by the fire and they build stuff and they catch critters and do it. They get to be human again for just a few hours, right? And so I'm pretty relentless when about avoiding it all. And I had an interesting thing happen. So you may have heard this in the States. I don't know if it's similar to where you are, but there's been a drop off, just a fall off a cliff of kids who want to get their driver's license. when they turn 16 in the United States, you have to be 16 to drive. And when I was a kid, I mean, at 14, you start talking about it and dreaming about it. And at 15, you start obsessing about it, right? And that morning you turn 16, you are at the Department of Motor Vehicle. You are out the door trying to get in, and no kid wants to drive anymore. And it's because their entire world is encapsulated in their phones and in their gaming systems and in their homes. There's no reason to leave. My whole world is here. And I just fold in on myself. My son, who had a relatively screen-free existence, the poor kid, is so obsessed about getting his driver's license. He can't wait. And it's developmentally appropriate. I want to get away from my parents. I'm going to be 16 years old. I want to go start making my own way in the world. That's what kids are supposed to do, not stay in the basement till they're 48 years old. You know what I mean? So I do think it's not hard. I think parents have to decide, I don't mind being the only one. And what they usually find, like I found, like my friends have found, if somebody will be the only one, a whole bunch of other parents are happy to get in line with you.
Yeah, that's an amazing example of.
Sorry, I get to preaching on that one a little bit, man.
No, I appreciate.
It's just like handing kids cigarettes. It's worse than that. It's worse than that because you're screwing up their neural. Yeah, I just don't understand the problem. I just don't understand why we keep doing it.
Well, let's stay on that then. What is a healthy age to give your kids access to the internet, to a smartphone? Is there a healthy age, or do you have to just let them become young adults? Like, what's your sort of framework for that?
In my house, my son actually, because both of his parents are nerds, he drafted he gave us a presentation, which I asked him to do kind of jokingly, and he did it. Again, his mom and I are quite the nerds. But here's what he said. He said, Dad, when you were a kid, at least you had a phone on the wall in the house that had that spirally cord that you could call your friends. I have no one. I'm completely isolated, and I can't text. I've got no way to communicate with my friends. I'm missing birthday parties. I get to school and something happened last night and I have no idea. And I'm increasingly out of the circle. And he was right. 100. I was proud of him for the case he made. And so for Christmas this year, he turned 14. I bought myself, and the language here is important, I bought myself another phone. And it stays plugged in our main living area. And it's not allowed there's no apps on it. The internet's off of it. It is phone and text. And can kids get around stuff? Of course they can. I would hope my kid sees my boundaries and tries to figure out ways around them. That means he's going to be a good leader someday, not just get in line, follow the rules. And I don't want that for my kid. I want him to figure things out. So am I naive? No. But it's not allowed to go in any room. It's not allowed to go outside. He's not allowed to take it with him anywhere. It is simply a communication device so he can text and call his friends on the phone. And I worked at a law school for a long time, so he knows don't put things in writing, right? So his texts are relatively limited. But all that to say is it is important that he has some connectivity with his social circle. That's important. That's the way they communicate. And I'm okay with that. But it's my job as a parent to not just hit that pendulum so far that's like, all right, well, here you go, buddy. Make good choices. And my daughter, of course, would have nothing, zero access until she gets to, and again, it's going to be kid specific, but middle school or high school. Wow. And then when it comes to like an age, I mean, my kids know I can't be the one that gives you a smartphone. So you won't have a social media account in my house. And I worked with college students for 20 years and just the data is falling off a cliff. And so I can't sit here and say, yeah, when you're 18 or you're 21 or you're 16, I can't say it's good for you. Yeah. People can do what they want to do, but I'm pretty restrictive when it comes to social media and kids.
Yeah, man. I know for myself, I didn't have a smartphone. I think it was a BlackBerry. I didn't have a phone until I was 16, 17, and I certainly wouldn't change that. I've seen what it's done to younger relatives and things like that. But again, this is a good example of we talked about this earlier. You talked about COVID, and there's a great line in the book, actually. I want to quote it. You said, COVID didn't give us all anxiety. It poured gasoline on a growing fire that's been burning for years. What specifically would you say it was about that time of our lives that has been the gasoline on top of our fire?
I think it accidentally, unintentionally, because I don't know anyone would be this nihilistic to do this on purpose. But but I think it pulled. I think most of us thought, yes, the government's the government, and they tax us, and we hate it, and they get special privileges, and yada yada. But most people thought most of the time the government was working for us. They're trying to do the best thing for their people. And I think most people thought their teachers of their elementary school kids were trying to do the best thing. And that's a place where there's no politics. We're just going to teach kids. And our doctors are trying to keep us healthy. And on and on and on. And then you look up and without meaning to, and then churches here in the States, I don't know how they are in South Wales, but they really bonded politically. They drew political lines and instead of staying above the fray or outside of the fray. And so really quick overnight, what I would call the four pillars of a society, the faith of the collective story, as Jordan Peterson calls it, that narrative that runs through a community, education, health, and the government, all of those things proved to be paper tigers, and the whole thing fell over. And we're all sitting around in the ash going, we don't believe medical, we don't believe education, we don't believe anybody anymore. And then we're looking at our kids and saying, here's a smartphone, let's just numb out that way, y'all go make good choices, right? Yeah. And then I think the bigger thing is I think our neighbors went bananas. Whatever that means, we watched adults who were scared for their lives. I was scared for my life. I didn't know what was happening day to day, and I had two little kids. I think we got scared, and when people get scared, they don't make great choices. They don't make great decisions. And in our culture, we don't have any more room for, hey, I'm sorry, man, or dude, I really overdid it, or I didn't take that into consideration. I'm sorry. We don't allow people to walk it back. We just burn you at the stake for something you did when you were scared or terrified. And I think we looked around and we have just burned our culture to the ground.
And I think touching on something we've already talked about, it did a really good job of reinforcing and teaching kids that they don't need the real world, that every bit of joy they've ever had can be replicated in technology, whether it's they learned a new way of communicating, maybe through playing games online with each other, or the metaverse, or all these things trying to replicate real life experiences. And again, you mentioned earlier about people not wanting to get their driving license. That doesn't surprise me, because this time where they've spent indoors is probably, reaffirmed in their minds that, what do I need a car for? I spent 4 years indoors. I wasn't missing out on anything. I had a pretty good time.
Well, and they can go to the accounts of all the car wrecks and car chases and mangled this and hurt that, and moms and dads that won't let them take one step off the stairs without bubble wrapping everything. And so how in the world would I get in a 2,000-pound metal box and drive it down the road at 70 miles an hour? Like that, the whole thing just sounds. Of course, they're anxious. Their bodies are trying to keep up with this madhouse we've dropped them into.
Yeah.
And I don't think the adults in their life have given them any sort. Like, why would they want to participate in the real world? Everyone is so angry. Everyone is so against each other. Nobody's for anything. They're against everything. And nobody has a plan other than to wad up your plan, and then your plan is just to wad up my plan. There is no other plan like hey, let's just all go over here. It's just the only plan is you can't go there. All right, well then you can't go there. All right, well you can't go there. And the kids are just like, you know what, I'm gonna go play Fortnite. It's way more fun, and at least I can. But here's the thing, as an adult, I shouldn't care what my kid quote unquote prefers, because my kid is gonna prefer gummy flavored fruit chews over actual fruit.
Yeah.
And it's my job as a parent. They're going to prefer Twinkies over. They're going to prefer cheeseburgers and french fries over healthy food. That's my job as a parent, to make sure that even though they want it, even though they prefer it, even though they're whining about it, I have to know what's best for their development, what's best for their health, and what's best for their long-term outcomes. It's my job.
Yeah, I wouldn't know this. I'm not a parent as of yet, but I can imagine.
You should become one. It's amazing. It's amazing. It's stressful, but it's amazing.
I intend on it. I can only imagine, and you can tell me this, that it must be quite a hard time at the moment to be a parent and know if you're being a good parent. And I think that when you can see that the majority of the world is running towards a cliff, you have to be the one brave enough to turn the other way and run against the tide. How hard is it right now to be a parent in this world? And how hard is it to even know what being a good parent is?
The first part of your question is my wife and we're pretty independent. So I don't think coming up with our values and holding to them is very hard. And we also, um, I love having my beliefs changed. That's one of my core principles in life. And so that's why have interesting conversations with people all over the world, and I read books and listen to podcasts because I want my beliefs to change. Why else would you spend time reading a book if you already know what the answer is going to be, right? And so I don't mind being wrong. My kid will never get a phone until he leaves my house. Well, my son made a very compelling case that he was dying of loneliness in my own home, and he was right, and I was wrong, and so I was happy to fix that, right? So that part of it, being a parent in that way, is not hard. Knowing if you're doing the right thing, that's scary. That's tough, man. You don't know about schools and curriculum and parents and teachers and which kids are safe and when do you let them fall down and when do you catch them before they fall. That whole thing, that's just tough, man. Just being a parent's tough.
Well, we've certainly made a good case for this being an anxious generation, an anxious time. What now, if everyone's listening and everyone's in agreement, let's just say everyone's in agreement with us at this point. What are the next steps going forward for this generation, for this world? Like, how do we've dropped them in this mess. How collectively can we get them out of it?
For a younger generation, from the 0 to 18, people always ask me, hey, my kid is struggling with anxiety. What can I do? And the first thing I'll always say is work on your marriage. Kids absorb the tension in their ecosystems. And so if your kids are struggling, not always, this is not always the case, but if your kids are struggling, often you getting the help that you need and you doing the work that you need it creates a huge shift in your home. For those who are 18 to 25, 18 to 30, I think the adults have to set an example in the workplace. The adults have to set an example. And by the way, it's both and. It's a new third way. It is not, we're going to crush it and grind it and we're going to work 20. You're going to die. Like this diseases of despair. You're just going to die. The other side of it is what the younger generation seems to be doing is looking at the older folks and going, well, I don't want that. And so then they just cash out completely. And somebody has to help build roads and build buildings and lead institutions. And so you can't cash out. So I think the 18 to 25-year-olds, 18 to 30-year-olds need a generation of men and women to provide a picture through behavior, change their actions. This is how people disagree. This is how people get together. This is how people plan. This is how people get really upset but come back together. And the younger folks have to be willing to work really, really hard and know that work in and of itself isn't going to solve them or fix them or change them as much as they'll be able to do some really cool things and play their small part in helping this whole society move forward.
Yeah, that's a brilliant point. And for these kids that spend so much time online and they see they've grown to idolize these people that are successful in their eyes by doing things that seem trivial, that seem fun, that don't seem like hard work, that, and the goals of kids these days, if you ask a kid these days, what do you want to be when you're older? It's probably going to be something like a TikTok or something. Mm-hmm. When I was younger, the answer was always like an astronaut or, something that right. seems physically really hard to do. And that seems to have made a big change.
Well, and I can't be, my son makes fun of me. He calls me a YouTuber all the time.
Yeah.
And he's right. And it's providing us a pretty obnoxious living. And so if he said, I want to go be a YouTuber, I'd be like, oh, no. But, I can't say you can't make a living doing that because I am.
You do it.
But I don't think most people understand how much work goes into stuff, right? So it's working hard and it's preparation. It took me 20 years to have the info and the insights and the ability to be able to do the job now, right?
Yeah, for sure. There's one really interesting reference you make in the book to actually a former guest, Judson Brewer. We've had him on this show. You talk about
he's the GOAT.
Oh, he's brilliant, man. And he describes anxiety as a reward-based system. Now, a lot of people listening to this, that might just completely go over their head. That might completely throw them off. They're thinking, what are you on about? What does he mean when he just describes it as a reward-based system? Because I think that might come as a shock to some people listening.
I would say the foundation way underneath that sentiment is the idea that when you're anxious, that does not mean your body's broken. It's just working like it's designed, and it's working as you have set it up. And so a reward-based system simply is your body is responding to external cues in the environment. And if it detects one as unsafe or potentially unsafe, then it's going to sound the alarm. Ta-da, that's anxiety, right? And interestingly, the one, when I wrote this book, I thought I knew the ins and outs of anxiety and how it all worked. And one thing I took from Dr. Brewer, which was just revolutionary for me, was if your body is anxious about something and you avoid that thing, it actually reinforces the anxiety response in your body. It makes it stronger because your body got what it wanted, and that was to avoid the thing. And so the only way to heal, the only way to teach your body to stop sounding the alarms all the time at social situations, at snakes, if you have a phobia, at heights, during when you're about to do public speaking, whatever your body gets anxious about, the only way to keep it from sounding the alarms is to head right towards the danger. And that's exposure therapy 101. But I didn't know that in avoidance, you actually reinforce your body's anxiety response, and you have to teach it something new.
That was going to be my next question. This reward-based system, how do people break the cycle? And you're saying head straight for the danger, tackle things head on, rather than just reaffirming those beliefs that is something.
Yeah, and not in a meathead way, right? So if you came to see me and you had a phobia of snakes, I wouldn't be like, "Here you go," and shove you into a pit of snakes, right? Your heart would stop. You'd have an aneurysm. But I would have you talk to me about snakes for a few weeks, and then you would draw a picture of snakes for a few weeks, and then I'd show you a photograph, and so we'd slowly get there. And so you'd over time teach your body, hey, when we were a kid, dad left us and mom worked 4 jobs, so she kind of disappeared too. And then we had some kids, and one of them was a little bit abusive at the playground. And over time, our body has put GPS pins in people. People are not safe. And now when we get around people that we don't know, we get anxious. And some doctor told me I have social anxiety disorder. The only way you're going to teach your body that all people are not unsafe is to head towards other people. Yeah. And you're going to have to figure out what's the path for you to get there. And Dr. Brewer talks about being mindful, experiencing that gap between trying to freaking out and just running, and feeling, no, my body's sounding the alarms. It's right, but we're okay now.
You mentioned social anxiety there. Growing up, I had terrible social anxiety, the point where I just stayed pretty much, kept myself to myself. I was extremely introverted. I didn't go to parties in school. I didn't socialize with anyone outside of school, simply because if it was more than 2 people there, I just had this horrible, horrible feeling, and I would just feel uncomfortable and feel like the world was closing in on me. That is something that has changed as we've mentioned, headed towards the anxiety. Going to university, going to college, that was a big factor in making that shift for me. I started a job in which I was front-facing customers early on in my career. That taught me a lesson quite quickly. And this podcast has completely changed it. Like, for someone who had social anxiety, didn't want to speak to anyone he didn't already know, to end up speaking to people speaking to somebody he doesn't know pretty much every day of his life. I think people.
I need to call it out. I'm super proud of you.
Thank you, my friend.
And here's why that's so important. Often these phobias, these especially social anxiety, it gets passed down to kids and to other kids, and kids learn from their parents that people aren't safe, and they learn that from their grandparents that people aren't safe. And what you did was you stared the fire down, and you probably got some scars, and you probably got burned, and you probably got made fun of in college sometimes. Sure. It was awkward and weird, right? Yeah. But this is how people change their family tree. And what you have done will have legacy repercussions. And I'm proud of you. It's hard. Social anxiety is one of the worst because people, like, the idea of shame and rejection is such a powerful motive. Like, it just deactivates everything in us, right? It's different than a snake, right? So you stared that straight on, and I'm proud of you, man. That's awesome.
Oh, thank you, brother. I appreciate that so much. People might be, watching this podcast, listening to you, to your very successful show, and they're thinking, this guy oozes confidence. He's extremely extroverted.
Dude, I'm a clown. I'm an introvert, man.
Well, people might build this idea of you. They might be surprised to know that you've had your own tango with anxiety throughout your life. When did that first come into your life, and when did you first realize that it was anxiety?
Oh man, it wasn't until I felt like I was coming unglued from reality. I was just having meeting after meeting and conversation after conversation. I was a university leader at the time, and I just thought people were all crazy. And I had a buddy of mine who was a banker. He's a very the opposite of me, like introvert, a banker. Everything works in a spreadsheet. He flips his mattress on rotation. Like he's just got everything. He's just the most put together guy. And he came and looked at something I was freaked out about, and he said, "There's no problem here." And he said, "You need to go talk to somebody." And that was the first time I had a friend in community tell me, "I don't think you're all right." That I thought for the first time, "Hey, maybe it's me." And I went and met with a doctor, and my doctor gave me a bunch of diagnostics. He's a friend of mine, but said, "Hey, I think your brain is trying to solve these problems this way and this way and this way." And that was a good first step. And by the way, yesterday, me and my wife made some financial decisions to go do something kind of crazy. I had a panic attack last night at 1 a.m. I went to sleep probably 3 o'clock in the morning and was up at 6 because I got kids running around going to school. And I laughed the whole time because I knew exactly what my body was doing. It was trying to get my attention. We're not safe. We're not safe. I know we're fine. Right.
Yeah.
But at this point, 10 years later, it's not that my body doesn't get anxious. Panic attack is probably too strong, but it was a pretty significant anxiety attack. At this time, I just read a book. I farted around. I worked on a talk I have to give tomorrow. Like, I know what's happening now, and I'm not going to war with my body anymore. It's just trying to get my attention. This is how it does it. I'm all good. It's kind of like when the smoke detector goes off in your kitchen. If you panic and run around, you're going to slip and fall and hit your head. If you just casually walk over there and pull the batteries out, you're fine, right? And so, or go see what's on fire and put that out. So it's not that I'm cured. It's still an innate part of my body is trying to get my attention. But yeah, I am not suffering like I was. But yeah, I was laid low. And I'm an introvert, dude. I'm pretty quiet when I'm not being loud, right? So yeah, the screens can tell a whole different story than reality.
For sure, man. I mean, I appreciate you talking about that. Only because I sort of mirror it in that I don't talk about this often on this show, but it was a while ago, probably 2 years, a year and a half, 2 years ago now. I was getting these. I didn't know what they were at the time. I was convinced I was having a heart attack, right? So, and I thought I had heart problems. I was calling the doctor. They said, you're 27 at the time. You're 27. It's probably nothing. And I was convinced. I was telling everyone. I could feel all these numbness in my. I thought I've got some pretty bad heart disease here. And one night I had this really horrible feeling. I turned to my fiance. I said, "I think I'm gonna die." I said, I'm having a heart attack. I said, "You need to take me to A&E at the hospital now." So we jumped in the car. We're driving down to the hospital. My life's flashing before my eyes. I'm thinking, what's going to happen when I die? Because I was convinced I was dying. We get to the hospital. They put me on the table, check the readings, ECG. They said, "There's nothing wrong with you." I said, "No, there's got to be something." They said, "There's nothing wrong with you." And I couldn't accept what they were telling me. So I went home the next day. I called my doctor. I said, I'm convinced. I ordered blood tests, a more thorough ECG. I went out to the hospital, had all the tests, came back. There's nothing wrong with you. And it wasn't until I had all that in front of me that I thought, okay, maybe there is something to this panic attack thing.
Well, but it's scary because it's almost I say this in like an all due respect way. It would be easier if you had a heart defect
Yeah,
because then you could
you
point to
know.
it.
Yeah.
There's something terrifying by when you feel betrayed by your own body.
Mm.
When it is acting like somebody's running at you with a hatchet and there's nobody there, you're just trying to watch TV with your fiance, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And your heart's beating out of your chest and everything's so tight and you can't breathe. And so it's a scary feeling when you feel like, oh, I can't trust me.
Yeah.
That's unnerving, right? It's scary.
Yeah. So it's like a superpower when you learn, and as you painted that picture with yourself, when these anxiety attacks come on, when you have the awareness of what's going on, you said you can almost laugh in the face of it now, and you can remind yourself what's going on, and it really does feel like when you gain that level of awareness, it feels like a superpower.
It's yeah. In the book, I talk about choosing mindfulness. That's what that is. And by the way, yesterday I made some dumb choices. I decided to do 2 workouts instead of 1. I decided to have a whole pot of coffee. I decided to start spreadsheeting, like digging into spreadsheets and creating catastrophic financial situations at 10:30 at night. All those things were dumb, and that's why I just started laughing. I picked a fight with my body, and my body's like, "All right, we want to sound the alarms. We're going to do it, baby, and we're going to do it till we run out of gas." And that was about 3:30 this morning. So I knew it, right? I knew what I had done, and I wish I could tell you why I did that, but here we are, and it's been a good low key kind of day today, and we'll go from there, right?
I love that. We mentioned one of the 6 daily choices. You mentioned mindfulness. I'd love to touch on maybe a couple of these. The first one, obviously, this show is called the Freedom Pact Podcast. One of the daily choices is freedom. That could look like many different things, money, time. But in the sense of daily choices, what does freedom mean?
If you think of yourself in a car and you're driving down the highway that is your life, who's driving? If you owe money to a mortgage company or to a car dealership, they are telling you what to do with your life. You said, hey, if I can have that car now, I'll pay you back later. And they said, cool. Get in the back seat, we'll drive. If you have an abusive boss and you owe 6 figures, you can't leave. And so that boss is driving. And time, are you still beholden to your mother-in-law who's like, you will come to Thanksgiving even though you can't afford it and it's too far away and you can't get off work. You will be here. If you're beholden to that, she's driving, you're not. And so the idea of choose freedom is, what do you have to do to get back in the driver's seat of your own life? Like when it came to paying off stuff, it took me and my wife 15 years. And man, I was a dean of students at a law school driving a $3,000 truck. And my colleagues made fun of me. It was loud and it was obnoxious. And only when I drove my wife's $2,000 Corolla on the off days. I mean, it was ridiculous. But more important than having a nice car was we were seeking freedom. I want to be able to walk out the door at any moment and say, y'all have a good day. I'm not doing anything unethical. I'm not doing anything that I don't want to do. I'm not going to work an extra shift for an abusive leader. And so choosing freedom is simply getting back in the driver's seat of your own life. And when your body knows, I think this is important. If your body knows, hey, if you get fired, if they have to do layoffs, if you say one stupid thing, they're going to take your house, your food, your cars. Your body would be failing if it let you sleep all night. It wouldn't be doing its job, keeping you safe. It would be failing you if it let you have a few moments of deep, intimate connection with your wife or your husband. It'd be failing you because you're trying to not die. And that's just the way we set up our life. Take out a mortgage, get a car payment, do this, like go to university on loan payments. Like it's just set it up that way, right? And our bodies are falling apart trying to get our attention, let us know we're not safe. So choosing freedom, calendar, boundaries, clutter, stuff. We have so much crap all over the place. And money, those are 4 of the big ones, but just choose freedom. It's way more important than the next shiny thing.
Oh, I love it, man. I love it. And, I can attest to it. This is kind of the reason that, we've had yourself and George on over the last couple of weeks. Everything that's been done and all the messaging that comes out of sort of the Ramsey network has been genuinely for myself, and I don't want to speak for him, but I will, for Joseph, my co-host. Honestly, some of the work from the Ramsey network and all you guys has completely changed our lives. So I can awesome. Just honestly, just want to say a testament to that.
Well, hey, you can edit this out, but any of the financial piece, the apps, any of that stuff, that I'll be happy to give it to you as my gift.
Oh man, you're a hero. I appreciate you
It's
so
awesome.
much.
You got it, man.
Another one I'd love to talk to you about, reality. We've talked a lot today about people being out of touch with reality, this generation, and there was a line in this section of the book where you said sometimes choosing reality means inviting sadness and grief and a lot of hurt into our lives.
Right.
Yeah, man, that is a sad reality, but why is that necessary?
Because your body knows. As Vanderkolk says, your body's keeping the score whether you want to pretend it is or not. Right? Your body knows if your marriage is falling apart. It does. It knows if she flips her phone over every time you walk into the room, whether you're consciously acknowledging that or not. Your body knows if you're 40 pounds or 40 kilos overweight and it hurts to walk upstairs. Your body knows. Even though I can still wear these jeans, your body knows, right? We had one recently. Dave, my boss, was doing an interview, and he's been taking a lot of flack lately from younger finance influencer folks, if you will, telling him that his money talks are out of touch, out of date, especially when it comes to buying a house in the United States. Housing has just doubled or tripled. It's just gotten astoundingly expensive over the last 4 or 5 years, and it may be even where you live. It's become a madness. And the thing is, math doesn't change. And so math is just math. And if the house that was $400,000 5 years ago is now $800,000 and your salary is the same, it's not out of touch to say, then you need to rent. That's just simply math. Because Dave has had 30 years of sitting with people who tried to do a bunch of financial gymnastics to get the thing they wanted right now, and it crashed in on them. And so choosing reality is saying, I really want to buy a house right now. And I want to live in this town and do this job right now. This is where my friends are, my family are. And I can't afford to do it. That's choosing reality. And maybe that's you get a new job. Maybe that's you move to a new town or a new state or a new province. But that's just choosing reality. Choosing reality is putting your phone down and looking at your spouse or your fiance and saying, hey, we're not okay. And I'm not going any further today. And the weird thing about our body, or the amazing thing, is when you have those hard conversations, when you start heading into the storm, your body knows you're in the driver's seat and it quits sounding the alarms. Like elite military guys head into wild situations. They're nervous, but they're not anxious. Pro fighters, I have some buddies that were pro fighters. Dude, they got real nervous, about to go fight somebody for money in front of thousands of people, but they weren't anxious about it because they trained like wild. They had trained and trained and trained and trained. And they had a plan, and they were headed straight in. Their bodies know, oh, yeah, he's ready to go, right? And so it's just taking ownership of reality. And the way I've described it is they call it the attention economy.
Yeah.
That's such a load of malarkey. It's the distraction economy. They just don't want you paying attention to anything going on in your real life, because if you do, you'll have to realize what you're doing is not working, and you got to do some other things. And so we live distracted, algorithm program lives. And in spite of all that, I'm super, super optimistic about what comes next.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes I think, being in touch with reality, I think for a lot of people, I think one of the barriers might be that it seems a little boring to them because of what's on offer for them. I think when I was a kid, and I think Joe talked to George about this. When I first started getting into self-help, personal development, I read some shockingly bad books looking back on it. I listened to some terrible advice. I was listening to the gurus telling you that debt is something that you need to leverage, that there's, bragging that they were $1 billion in debt and how it's such a wealth building tool. And that's quite a appealing thought when you're young and you've just, come into your paycheck and you've got credit cards and you've got someone telling you that, your bad habit, it might actually be quite good for you. It's really appealing, but it does take some hard lessons along the way to find yourself in some pretty shit situations before that reality hits you and you think, maybe I was fed something a little bit disingenuous here, and you start turning to alternative narratives, the real narratives that may not offer you all the trappings and the sort of glamorous parts of riches. But I think sometimes you need to go through those shitty lessons and speak to those sort of gurus to be able to learn what's right and what's real in the world.
Well, I think it's one thing I love about where I work is an almost pathological obsession with how is this going to help people,
Yeah.
not how's it going to make us rich. There's an old Zig Ziglar quote that is, if you help enough people, you'll never worry about money. And that philosophy is really interwoven here. And so, I mean, we could get on a platform. This platform is enormous. It's one of the largest in the United States, and spout off a bunch of stuff that's going to make us wealthy, especially in the short term.
Yeah.
And it's going to cause a cascade of hurt among everyday people who are just trying to figure out what comes next in their lives, who are scared, who want to provide the best for their young kids. And they're going to take out a ton of debt. They're going to leverage a bunch of cars, and then the whole thing's going to fall on them. And so it's not about us at the end of the day. It's about helping people live a little bit better lives, because lives are tough, man.
No, for sure, man. And this, the messaging that all you guys put out, from yourself to George to Dave, absolutely. My younger brother, he's never read a book in his life, and he's 18 now, and he's got his sort of first proper paychecks coming in, and he's starting to get excited by the money. I said, I know you've never read a book in your life. I said, but I gave him the Total Money Makeover. I said, you're going to read this one. I promise.
There you go.
Yeah, I'm going to make you read it. If I have to sit you down, and I'll read it to you. Yeah, brilliant, man. I want to, as we start to wind down, just a couple of questions left. I'd love to read a quote from your book, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
So it's under the subheading, Safety is an Illusion. So this is not an easy life, or the perfect life, or the free from tragedy life. That life does not exist. It's an illusion sprung from Hollywood screens and the pages of romance novels. It's the non-anxious life, the anti-fragile life, a defiant counterculture life that chooses patience, joy and kindness over frantic schedules and one more dollar on top of one more dollar, and dying on the hill when absolutely necessary. In this life, safety is called out for the illusion it truly is, because even when it looks like it from the starting line, there are no easy paths. We have to choose our hard. What does choosing hard look like for the everyday person?
I think the illusion is somebody wakes up, and without even meaning to, they're 40 pounds overweight. And it just became an extra meal here, a drive-through here, missed a workout here, and then you wake up 7 years later and you've got children now and your schedule's hectic and you're just 40 pounds overweight. The illusion is going to the gym would be too disruptive. It's too hard. And choosing how you eat and being highly intentional, you don't have time for, you don't have headspace for that. It's too hard. And what I want to lay out for folks is being 40 pounds overweight is also very hard. It's hard on your body. It's hard on your joints. It's hard on your emotions. It's hard on the way you see yourself, right? And so I think the illusion that I was talking about in that excerpt that you read is there's an easy way to do life and a hard way. There's not. There's just hard ways. You can do easy for a minute. You can eat Twinkies all day, and you'll have projectile rocket diarrhea the following day, right? And so, like, it's easy for a minute, but it's going to get hard. And so the other hard alternative is to not do that. If you don't have any money, don't buy any trash food. If you have the money, because clean food is more expensive, take that option. And what you're going to find over time is the more you take the hard path towards where you want to be, not the hard path that you're just accepting, man, you transform everything.
Now, one question I want to ask you before we head to our sort of final wrap-up question I ask every guest. You've put out so much content over the years on, a number of shows, and some of the phone calls you've dealt with over the years have been absolutely wild. You've had some crazy stories, man. I think, I remember seeing one call you got from someone who was saying that their best friend was a pedophile. They didn't know what to do about it.
Mm-hmm.
Some of these calls you deal with, man, are absolutely extraordinary circumstances. What call comes to mind when I ask you about a call that'll live with you forever, or one that you'll never be able to forget?
Ooh, that's a great one. There was one, there was two that have haunted me. One was a man, he was an engineer in Houston, had 5 kids, and I could hear in his voice that he was just done. He was done with the life he was living, and he was trapped in a cage of duty and what he thought being a man was supposed to look like, and the things he wanted to do. He wanted to hug his kids. He didn't want to work 90 hours a week, but he also had to create a lifestyle. He was just trapped. And that was the most everyman call I think I've taken on the show. I just that feeling is so pervasive across the world. And the second one was the fireman who showed up on scene to his own sons had passed away. And that was a tragic, that was a very hard call. That man actually came up and visited. He flew up, him and his wife flew up and met with me, and we had some neat moments to sit and weep together and hug together. But those were two that have stuck with me.
As I said, man, you put out some seriously transformational content, so I can honestly. The one question we ask every guest on this show, no matter what the subject, no matter what they do, their profession, I'm going to ask it to you right now. For John Delony, what makes life worth living?
Oh man, you get me all choked up on that one. When my wife laughs real hard, she's kind of a mean stoic, and occasionally she'll laugh hard, and I can't stop smiling. My daughter has had some struggles, and her and I have, she's 8, and we've had some struggles, and we started instituting swing dancing every few nights in our living room. And occasionally I'll catch a glimpse of her in the mirror. I don't know how to dance, dude. I'm just swinging her around like a maniac. But her face is so wide open with joy, and seeing the young man, my son, he's 14, is becoming, and how he treats his friend, and how he stands up for the least of these, and how he is super dedicated to hospitality. And so seeing that come to life, seeing him become the man that I'm going to be so proud, I'm already so proud of him, is those things make my life worth living.
That's beautiful, man. Thank you so much for that. Before we let everyone know where they can get the book, where they can connect with you, I have to ask you, I'm a big guitar nerd. What is that poster behind you?
Oh, it's an awesome gift, man. So I'm a Gibson fanatic. It's kind of my jam, even though I got into Jackson last year, like old metal kid, and kind of funny. I got it ironically, and now I kind of love them. This is the original patent for, let me move over here, for the Flying V.
Oh, yeah.
That was submitted to the U.S. Patent Office by Gibson back in the day.
Wow, that's so
and
cool.
So a couple of people on my team bought that for me for a gift, and it's a pretty cool poster. I love good Flying V.
That's amazing. Who's your favorite band?
Oh, goodness, that's a tough question. I used to follow Pantera around everywhere.
Wow.
As a kid, I loved loud, aggressive. My favorite band right now is probably Turnstile. They're phenomenal. Really remarkable group that's out. Yeah, check them out when this is over. I'll send you down a rabbit hole and you won't come out for a while. They're phenomenal.
I love it. I'll be all over it, man. I'm a big metalhead.
Social Distortion is probably my favorite of all time.
Amazing. Amazing. Well, let's let everyone know we've been here today. We've been talking about building a non-anxious life. Where can everyone listening and watching right now find the book and connect with yourself if they want more from John Delony?
First, let me say I'm really grateful for your hospitality, man, for inviting me over to a rainy South Wales. And you can get that book anywhere. You can buy books. It helps me out a little bit more to get it at johndelony.com, but you can get it at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, everywhere you can get books. I have a show that releases Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So only after you listen to this show right here, you can catch my show, and it's a call-in show where people call in from all over the world with just challenges they're working through, and we figure it out and solve them together. And it's a funny show, and it's a heartbreaking show. It's all over the place, and it's called the Dr. John Delony Show. You can see that on YouTube or wherever you get podcasts.
And an absolutely brilliant show it is. I will link that and the book in the show notes below. But for now, John, thank you so much for joining me. It's been an absolute pleasure. I've been a fan of yours for many years. So it's a pleasure to finally speak to you, my friend.
Well, I'm grateful for you, man. And best of luck to Freedom Pact